Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown. This time we're going over the Oceania Area Championships in Melbourne, Australia. So giving the Aussies some love, giving the Kangaroos some love, and I'm going to shout out my teammate Jack for getting top 8. We'll talk more about that in a little bit once we get into the deck breakdown. But if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the awesome Dragon Ball Super content that I post here. If you guys are looking for a Dragon Ball Super community to get in touch with, check out the Discord in the description below. Awesome group of people. If you guys want to help support the channel or get caught up on some competitive content, make sure you check out the Patreon in the description below. And finally, guys, if you want to buy any of these decks, buy any of the cards in these decks, or pre-order your draft boxes, make sure to use my link to TCG Player in the description below. Really helps the channel out a lot. Really appreciate it. Starting off with the breakdown, we have 3 Janemba in this top cut. Now that's really interesting because normally we've been seeing like 1 to 2 Janemba, really just only 1 Janemba making top cut for the most part. We've been seeing a bit of a split between like mono blue builds, I guess you can call them like blue black builds that play more of like a silver bullet package, and then like a split between that and like the blue yellow builds that are really taking advantage of like the blue yellow counter plays. Like you have your Wide Open, you have your Mutaito, the Chomp of the Trickster that's like a Mutaito, you have the Future Gohan, and of course you have Frost Poison, which is a card that not many people thought would be very, very playable, but Janemba's taking good advantage of it because realistically, you can pass turn with like 3, 4, 5 energy up and still advance your game and still meet your win condition of milling your opponent out. So what's funny about this top cut is that there are no mono blue, no blue black, no blue red, whatever you want to call them. It is 3 Janemba in top cut and it's 3 blue yellow Janemba in top cut. Now, this is really interesting because we are in like a boss monster oriented format, so this kind of makes sense, right? So Chomp of the Trickster picks up a ton of value in a format where you have like Gogeta 7, where you have Height of Mastery, where you have Kaioken Goku being popular. The blue-yellow build just makes a whole ton of sense. You also have things like Flying Nimbus for U6, which is really good. You have you have Nimbus for any of your basically low-to-the-ground aggro decks. And even some of these decks are still teching the Further Instruction Champa. Some of them are still playing the pseudo combos, maybe not the full 8, maybe not the 4 breakable and the 4 cell, but they're still playing a copy, probably like 4 to 6 of each, some of them, and some of them are still teching the Further Instruction Champa, so they can still kind of end games, mostly as like a one of, but it's still a really cool, innovative way to build the deck. I mean, the deck's not the most exciting thing to watch, but from a deck building perspective, from a player perspective, it is interesting to see how these players kind of dissected Janemba, took the best things from the blue builds, which was probably the pseudo combos. They added in that Frost Poison and those other counter plays that just provide a ton of value. So 3 Janemba in top cut, pretty interesting. We might see Janemba come back up over the hill come these next few events. Next up, 1 single yellow Broly in top cut, and it was the winner of the event. So this person, as far as I know, he won the Melbourne Area Championship last year and this year, so kind of like a back-to-back win for him. Congratulations to this player. His deck profile is somewhere on YouTube. I've seen it before, but I don't know the exact channel. It's not like I don't think it's like a Dragon Ball only channel, but they played the event. They went with U6 Broly. That's really interesting. This is something I've heard about for a little while now. Haven't really seen it in action, and I actually know that this player said he got the list from Marcel Russell on PBG's Patreon, so that's kind of interesting. I guess the idea was put up by Marcel, amazing player, amazing deck builder, and yeah, it just seems like a really, really good aggro version of the deck. You know, U6 Height of Mastery, which has been the most popular build of Broly for probably I guess the longest stretch of time now, it's not really viable just because like 15k aggro isn't what it used to be. Like just spamming dependables and not being able to play Bardock to get, you know, 2 attacks for 1 energy, having to rely on that 15k aggro just isn't really what it used to be, especially with all the defensive tools we have in the game right now. So playing this U6 aggro where you can get bigger threats in like 20k double strikes and crits, and you also have a bunch of free 10ks which can help the deck's kind of glass cannon problem, because yellow Broly takes a lot of life to gain advantages, and that really hurts you in the late game. So having all those free 10k combos can help. The one thing I'll say though is I really feel like this is only an aggro version, and I believe the guy who won the event said so much himself. You don't really have access to that Kefla that taps your opponent's energy defensively, so in my opinion that can hurt you a bit, but still really cool aggro deck nonetheless. You know, some people think that aggro is like dead in the game, but this is a cool example of aggro in my opinion. Probably more on the expensive side, but still playable nonetheless. Shenron, we have 2 of them in top cut. One was another Shenron U6, so we see that U6 very, very popular this event, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. But Shenron U6, just another aggro variant. You want to assemble this squad into the 2-drop hit from the structure deck. That is basically a Chomp of Bottles for 1 turn. You go off in that 1 turn, and you kind of just put your opponent in a crippling position. And then we have 1 Shenron ramp. So people seem to be really deteriorating away from the typical Shenjita formula and going towards the Shenron ramp. We did see a 2nd place finish at PPT Philly from this deck, so it definitely has proven its merit. Being able to drop a Gogeta 7 and a Kaioken as early as turn 4, but probably on average like turn 5 is very, very good. Of course, I mean, that's just like game ending right there. Even if you're not giving one of them triple attack, you're still getting the triple strike from the Gogeta, the dual attack triple strike from the Kaioken, and you're ripping your opponent's hand apart. At the same time, if you have a Shenron figure of Majesty that happened to survive a previous turn, you're getting that additional crit as well, probably on the Kaioken for the 2 swings. So really, really crippling deck, and we're in a bit of a slower format. There are a lot of aggro decks, like we saw Yellow U6 Broly, but there are so many good defensive options now with all the counterplays in action that you can play a slower deck even in the face of aggro and still do pretty well. So really interesting there. We have one Toa in we have 2 Toas in this top cut. So Toa, not really super surprising. We've seen it dominate the American scene. It seems like this event might have had less Toa in representation though. I believe it was about a 115 player event from what I've seen online. So Toa is probably a little bit less represented here. I think U6 had a ton of representation because we are going to talk about the 4 Kaba that was in this top cut. So again, really popular deck. It's been very popular online. Obviously you see it all the time, but a lot of people see that it also has weaknesses. But in this type of environment, if you're seeing it being represented so highly, whether it's with the Kaba leader, whether it's with the Shenron leader, whether it's with the Yellow Broly leader, of course it's going to make tons and tons of waves in that top cut. And I think a lot of people want to play a more controlling game, so they're going to play the Kaba leader, where you get rewarded for tapping your opponent's energy. You get access to that Kefla that Shenron and Broly don't have. So no brainer there that that Kaba did make it so far in a top cut with 4 spots. U6 as a total, as a kind of collection, taking up 6 spots in this top 16. Really interesting. But back to Toa real quick. Yeah, I mean, this deck is just always going to be there. I think it might be more dominant in certain formats, it might be a little bit less dominant in other formats. I think it all has to do with representation, because Toa is a very good deck. It's hard to beat because of how defensive it is with the leader's kind of God Strike ability. But with that being said, I think representation here has a lot to do with why there's only 2 Toa in top cut, but like in America we see 4 Toas on average. Next up, really cool deck. We have a blue-yellow Hiru that's actually using the Hiru package. So like that's your 9-drop Hiru from I think like set 4, where it has an auto that negates an attack by pitching a card in your hand and sending itself to the warp. And then when that card comes back, you get its enter play effect again. That enter play effect is when you play it, you get to take one of your opponent's battle cards and 1 random card in their hand and stack them on top of their deck. So basically every single time you use the effect of Hurdigarn, the battle card, the 9-drop, you're going to be getting a +2 on your opponent, which is pretty strong over the course of a late game, especially like I said, when you can go into these kinds of longer extended games, even against like Kaioken. You know, if you have an all too easy in the drop area and you have a Hurdigarn on board, they can't really deal with it because it has barrier. So they can't really kill you with the Kaioken, which is pretty interesting. I think this is a really cool deck. Blue-yellow hero control. We've seen mono blue in the past, and I think this is kind of the new iteration of that. And it's cool that it actually main decks the actual Hurdigarn engine. Next up, we have yellow dente. This is a deck that I think is just kind of solidified itself as a rogue contender, because we see it once in a while. We don't see it all that often. I don't think we've seen it top an American event in probably 2 or 3 events now. But it's just a deck that, if you have the right pilot, this deck can go very far, because of that controlling factor of it. You know, looking at your opponent's hand, ripping it apart is very good. We do have a lot of decks in the format that draw a ton of cards, but against like U6, where they have a very limited hand size, you can put their super combos down in rest mode. They're not going to have a lot of strong defensive options except for that Kefla. So you put people in very awkward situations with the deck. I still do like it. I think it has its faults though, like having too many 10k combos, not having enough combo power in certain instances. But again, I think it's a very strong deck. And a really cool tech card in this deck actually is the Troublemaker Caulifla. That is from the expert deck. When you play it, you take a life and you tap one of your opponent's energies, so you have just more control options there. Now you're controlling the hand and your opponent's energy. That's a really good tech in my opinion. Now we come to the red green Gogeta deck that came in top. That was my teammate Jack. Again, shout out to Jack, the kangaroo of Shenron's lair. So he played a deck that we've been working on, that mostly him and Chris Welch have been working on, and that is red green Gogeta BR. It's somewhere in between like red green Kaioken deck and Prison, where you spend a lot of your time just like passing turn with energy up, so you can play counter plays like Vegeta the Cruel. You also can like interrupt your opponent's attacks with Arrival into Gogeta, the BR Resonant SSB Gogeta. And you also have the Kaioken Goku Arrival into the SR Piccolo 4-drop from set 7, where you can KO a 2-drop or less and then your opponent pitches 2 cards. So it's basically just red green good stuff deck. It's a very powerful deck. I've been testing it, and shout out to Jack for getting top 8 with this deck. And then finally, guys, we have green yellow Broly BR, the green Broly leader, making an appearance back in this top cut. Again, just like Dende, I think this is more of a rogue pick. I do think this deck is very strong, but with the loss of Bloodlust, this deck has an even tougher time with removal, especially against things like Dimensional Banisher Fu. It's a 5-drop, so it's out of range of Preemptive Strike. This was actually a green-yellow build, and this also teched the Troublemaker Khalifa from the Expert deck to tap the opponent's energy. Really helpful, so like their opponent can't really negate without taking life, because in certain instances, especially with an aggro deck like Green Broly, if your opponent's taking life to negate, they're just putting themselves in more unfavorable situations because you swing with big 25k, 35k double strikes every single turn. So this is a deck that I think if you catch the right matchups, if you catch people that are off guard, that aren't prepped for it, because we haven't seen this deck in a while, people probably aren't siding and prepping for it, I think you're going to come into some favorable matchups. So overall, pretty interesting event. I think that it was a pretty diverse meta, which is what we've been seeing, you know, even in the American events. You know, we had about 9 different leaders in this top cut, and even amongst those 9, like there were different variations of the deck. So maybe between like 12 and 15 different types of decks in this top 16, which is really, really cool to see. So I'm really happy with the format right now, guys. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this event. If you were at that event, maybe you can give us some more information. That would be sweet. I'm going to drop the link to the deck list in the description below, so if you're looking for that, make sure to check down there. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Joey. This is Crossroad TCG, and I'll see you guys in the next video.